Sweden, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, compared to Ghana, a poor country in the west part of Africa, will probably make you think that there are a lot of differences between the two. But are these two countries really that different, or do they also share some similarities? How would my life as a 17 years old boy look if I were to live in Ghana instead of Sweden? Would I have the same opportunities in healthcare? Would my income be the same? And how would I impact the environment differently? When it comes to well-being in healthcare, I have better preconditions in Sweden than in Ghana. For example, according to the World Factbook, the chances of me getting a dangerous disease like HIV or AIDS is 14 times greater in Ghana than in Sweden. The chances of me surviving birth would also be 14 times less in a Ghanaian hospital than in a Swedish hospital, meaning that the chances of me even being alive would be less if I was born in Ghana instead. And this both depends on that the chances of me getting a dangerous disease like AIDS is bigger in Ghana, as well as the healthcare in Sweden is better. In fact, as a Swedish citizen, I spend 98% more money on healthcare than I would do as a Ghanaian citizen. In most parts of Sweden, am I feeling pretty safe walking home at nights? In Ghana, on the other hand, would I probably not feel as safe, since the murder rate there is almost 90% higher. So when it comes to this aspect, it is true that Ghana and Sweden have a lot of differences. And if I was born in Ghana instead of Sweden, I'd probably have a worse well-being, and my safety in general would be more threatened. As I said in the beginning, Sweden is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and despite that fact, would I be more likely to be employed in Ghana than in Sweden, as the employment rate in Ghana is almost 30% higher. The chances of me getting an education, however, would be less if I was born in Ghana. Only 90% of the children there goes to school, while the remaining 10% is prevented to go because of poverty. Compared to Sweden, where it's for me and everyone else between the age of 6 to 16, mandatory and free to go to school. But if I am a part of those 90% that actually get an education, I would most likely grow up to be a farmer or salesman, and my income would probably be around 90% less than if I was to be a doctor or technologist in Sweden. Although my income would be higher in Sweden, I'd have to pay more taxes, since the tax rate here is 32 to 57%, depending on how big your income is, while the tax rate in Ghana is only 25%. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, as a Swede, I would spend 98% more money on healthcare than I would do as a Ghanaian. To summarize, I will most likely have a higher income, and I will be guaranteed an education in Sweden. But if I were to live in Ghana, I'd have to pay less taxes. So far, statistics shows that it's better for me growing up in Sweden when it comes to health and wealth. Yet it all comes to a cost. Most times, having a good wealth means sacrificing the environment, and this suits perfectly in between these two countries, as I'd have a much less negative environmental impact if I was born in Ghana. For instance, the average Ghanaian person consumes about 14 times less oil, and their usage of electricity is about 70 times less than the average Swede. As oil and electricity must be consumed and produced, there will at the process be a lot of climate disruptive emissions. As a Swede, my carbon footprint is about 4 times higher than if I was to be Ghanaian. And one way to get a better look on how I would impact the environment differently is by measuring each country's ecological footprint, which shows how much land each person needs to sustain their usage of natural resources, where the lower the number, the better. As stated from the Global Footprint Network, in Sweden, the average person's ecological footprint is 6.6, while the average Ghanaian's ecological footprint is only 2. So in brief, if I was to be born in Ghana instead of Sweden, I'd live a much more environmentally friendly life. Finally, Sweden and Ghana are after all two quite different countries, although they do share some similarities. As a 17-year-old boy, I'm very lucky to be born in Sweden, although I wouldn't be in any way unlucky to be born in Ghana. Yet, according to statistics, the Swedish healthcare is much more developed, and I would most likely grow up to have a better, higher paid job. But my environmental impact in Sweden would generally be worse. In other words, Sweden and Ghana are different depending on the subject, and it's safe to say that my life would look a lot different if I was born in Ghana.